All right, here's a story that I sort of started. I wanted to tell you a few days ago, but I sort of forgot it. Now I'm telling. I remember the story. The Gaon of Vilna. He lived at the same time as the first Rebbe of Chabad. He was a very holy person, an amazing genius, and extraordinarily devoted to the Torah. He would learn day and night without stop. He would sleep something like 2 hours a day or something, if that at all, almost not eat. And he would just learn Torah. And in addition to that, he was a genius in the Torah. He was a genius. And people came from all around to ask him questions. And he wrote books. He wrote a lot of books of Kabbalah also. He had a whole different way of looking at Kabbalah than Chabad, which that's not to be talked about now. Anyway, he decided there was at that time what was called the Haskalah movement, the Enlightenment movement, they called it. And Jews were leaving Judaism in droves, because Judaism had nothing to offer to them, Judaism, except for going to heaven. And, who needs it? They were very unhappy in this world. On the other hand, in the non-Jewish world, science, philosophy was just blossoming. It was blossoming. They had the ideas of Newton, things like that. From that, people surmised that you could understand everything in the world. Things that people thought were only, were incomprehensible. Suddenly, with the laws of Newton, the surrounding of the planets and everything, planetary motion and all this, and gravity, all of a sudden, things became understood. So people started becoming more and more intellectual. And also the arts became more interesting and developed, and music and operas and philosophies, new philosophies with it. Anyway, thousands and thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of Jews left Judaism. And they went to learn science and things like that, the religious community was almost not, even aware of it all. So the Gaon of Vilna, Rabbi Eliyahu of Vilna, he sent, some people say 10 followers, and some people say 10 millions of followers to Berlin. Berlin was a very big center of this, how do you say, intellectual movement. To go there to learn the sciences and to learn this, and to utilize them for Judaism. Anyway, so they all went, and all of them became non-religious. All of them. They all became enamored of, with the lively, colorful, vibrant world. And a lot of them opened up lively, colorful, vibrant talents in themselves. Some of them realized that they were good writers and authors and, performers or whatever, the scientists. Anyway, so that's it. They all left. They all left Judaism. They all stopped believing in Judaism. And they were all Talmudic scholars, but they went over there and found there was also maybe even greater Talmudic scholars than them that had left. So anyway, they left, except for two. One of them was Rabbi Moses Meislish, or Meisels. And I told the story about him before, how he became a Chassid of the Alter Rebbe, and he was sent to be a spy on Napoleon. Remember, I told that story a few. And the other one was a fellow called Fagin. His last name was Fagin. I don't remember what his first name was. I don't think it was written in the story. So both this fellow Fagin, and Moses Meislis, they went, traveled. They didn't want to leave Judaism. But on the other hand, they didn't want to go back to where they were. They knew that there had to be, all of their friends left. They had to find some sort of a power that could save them from being enticed into this world of, secularism or whatever it's called. Something to make them happy. So they ended up that they both went to the first Rebbe of Chabad, Rebbe Shneur Zalman. And this Moses Meislis, he became enamored of the Rebbe. He really liked it. And so he stayed. And so it was also with this fellow Fagin. He really, they were both geniuses. They were geniuses, tremendous. Oh, I think, if I'm not mistaken, there was another one also, and he wrote the book, which was called, what was it called? I have the book. I'll think of it later. I don't remember. Anyway, okay. I think there was another one else. Anyway, those two. So he stayed by the Alter Rebbe. and this Fagin also stayed. One day, the one day, what's this? How do I get rid of this here? This one. I can't do this. Okay. All right. One day, the Alter Rebbe was giving us a lecture, and he was lecturing on washing your hands. Washing your hands before you eat. And he's talking about the spiritual aspects of washing the hands. And this fellow, Fagin, he was there. And he gave a little smirk, like, come on. And the Alter Rebbe said, I think there's a little worm eating away inside of him. Something like Mitrachtes is from a kleine Vermela in Venik. There's a little worm inside of him. Anyway, after a little while, he decided to leave Judaism. Leave Judaism. Little by little, it was coming into his mind to leave Judaism. Now this fellow Fagin, he was also a businessman. He was very talented at business, and he always would do. So the Alter Rebbe realized what was going on inside of his mind, and the Alter Rebbe said to him, right? The Alter Rebbe is Rebbe Shneur Zalman that we learn in his book, right? He said to him, "Listen, I have a monetary thing with somebody in another city. Please, maybe you could go there." Or he said to him, maybe you should take some time off and make some money. Go to a place where you are, to a place where there's business or something. He gave him a blessing to go to this other place. And he said, when you're on the way there, please stop in at the Rav Shlomo Mikarlin. Please stop in at Rav Shlomo Mikarlin and say greetings from me. So he said, okay. So he left. He already had in his mind that he was going to leave Judaism. He was debating. So anyway, so he left. He went on the way to this town where the Alter Rebbe told him to go. So he stopped in at Rav Shlomo Merkarlin's place. One of his helpers, his Chassidim, said, okay, just sit here. This is outside of the room of Rabbi Shlomo. And when he comes out, he'll invite you in. So he sat there and he waited, and he waited, and he waited. And suddenly he heard from the room of Rabbi Shlomo Merkarlin like a big noise, like somebody walking, pacing back and forth in the room, knocking over things, rocking over things. And suddenly Rabbi Shlomo Merkarlin opened up the door and he stuck his head out and he looked at this Fagin and he had like very sort of frightening eyes. And he said, maybe after all, God exists. Tomer fort als is Franen Eberster. Maybe after all, God exists. And he closed the door and went back in. And this fellow was just sitting there, and he heard him walking back and forth in the room again, knocking over things. And again, he opened up the door and he said, maybe after all, God really does exist. And he closed the door. And he was sitting there all still, and he was shaking from this experience that he had. And he did the same thing the third time. He heard the noise in the room. Reb Shlomo Karlin opened up the door, and you could see that he was all like, how do you say, excited. And he said, maybe after all, God really does exist. And he closed the door, and this fellow Fagin just ran out the door, ran away. He left, ran away. So he left Judaism totally. Left Judaism totally. The Alter Rebbe passed away. And he was buried in the city of Hadich. And the city, the government of Russia decided they wanted to build a big road right where his grave was and to move the grave. And the Chassidim tried whatever they could to get the government to change their mind, and nothing worked. So the Mittler Rebbe, the second Rebbe, sent one of his Chassidim, and I'm not sure if it wasn't Reb Moshe Meislis or not. It could have been. And he sent him, and he said, go to this minister of transport in Russia, something like the minister of transport, minister of this, of building, and ask him. And he went there, and sure enough, it was this Fagin. It was this fellow Fagin. And he said, told one of his helpers, he was the minister, sat in this big, huge, ornate room, and this, and he had this tremendously high position. And he said, what do you want? So he said, I want to, there's a lot of similar stories that are similar to this, but what do you want? He showed him the whole thing. He said, I want you to change the place where the altar, where the road is going to go. So he took out this big map, this fellow Fagin took out a big map where the road was supposed to go, and he took out an eraser, and he erased the place where the road was supposed to go with the altar, and he made a big detour. And he said, that's it, that's where the road is going to go. It'll go around this whole city of Haditz. And he closed it. And he said that you should know that what has kept me faithful to Judaism is that experience that I had with Rabbi Shlomo McCarlin. If not, I would have left totally. He said he married a Jewish woman, whatever it is. But he's left Judaism, doesn't do any of the commandments or anything. But he still has this inner feeling for Judaism from that experience that he had with Reb Shlomo of Karlin. So the person who was sent there, I'm not sure if it was Moses Meisels or not. Anyway, he went back to the Rebbe and he told the Mittler Rebbe this whole story. So he said, listen, I don't understand. Why did he send this Fagin to Reb Shlomo Bar Karlin? Why didn't he say himself, maybe God exists, maybe God exists? He said, because my father couldn't have said that. Maybe God exists. He couldn't say maybe. Maybe God exists. By him, it was a certain, without any, as certain as it was to Shlomo Bar Karlin. They were both certain, but the Alter Rebbe couldn't bring himself to say maybe God exists. And that is the story of how the grave of the first Rebbe of Chabad remained where it is, and how no Jew can ever separate themselves from the Creator. Have a good day with Mashiach now.